Welcome to another news. I'm Jeff Brady. On this show, we've looked at various challenges to areas of science and research known to be settled and established research upon which more data has been built. However, sometimes a paradigm is exposed to be false or poorly vetted and is ultimately crushed. This will often leave a vacuum and often a silence where the research proving a paradigm to be false is ignored. Years go by, and when the timing is right, or it's okay for the, quote, proper researchers to reintroduce a false paradigm research, then the release of this knowledge to a wider audience is permitted. 9 years ago, past guest Harry Hubbard, known as the Paradigm Crusher, produced a video reviewing what he termed, quote, the religion of geology, using books, encyclopedias, and early articles. What Harry reveals is how a fragile theory of how glaciers and ice sheets shaped the Earth's surface was asserted into the public domain in the mid-1800s. In the following decades, the Ice Age concept began to evolve into multiple ice ages as more research was brought forward. Now, scientists postulated there may have been up to 30 repeating ice ages. Harry is asking questions such as, how are multiple ice ages determined if earlier glaciers would wipe out the topographical evidence from previous ice ages? Another interesting fact, inconsistent with the Ice Age theory, is how the same topographical scarring occurs near the equator in Brazil and parts of the Sahara Desert. Yet, no glaciers were known to be formed in those areas. Where this leads is fascinating, but at the same time disturbing in how societies have learned to trust academia, to trust the science, and not question what's known to be, quote, established concepts about the history of the Earth's formation and climate. Without getting into the weight of climate change and geoengineering operations, Harry Hubbard returns with an overview of his video titled The Religion of Geology. Harry Hubbard is a researcher and collector of rare books, maps, and artifacts. We've done several high-quality interviews in the past, including an expose on the ancient Egyptian repository in the southern Illinois caves, and also on the many maps depicting Atlantis and the Bargos Islands at the North Pole. Harry Hubbard, welcome back to Another News.
Thanks, Jeff.
Well, Harry, prior to the early Ice Age theory in the 1830s, from what I understand, the common thinking was a great deluge or catastrophe shaped the Earth. More specifically, what's known as Neptunism was a belief that the surface of the Earth was shaped by water. Before we venture into your research on the Ice Age theory, I want to add a bit of text from a publication in 1671 titled America, being the latest and most accurate description of the New World. Here, one of the many authors of the book describes various creation stories and how the Great Deluge was a prominent event within the narratives. Okay, bear with me here. Quote, "Who hath not heard of Deucalion's flood, how his wife Pyrrha and he only escaped in a little boat, and 'tis fabled, landing on a mountain, from thence peopled the world again, by throwing stones backward over their heads." Something of this, the author writes, seems to hint at the true story of Noah and his wife and children, from whom the desolated world was replenished. It continues, "The same they relate of Prometheus, concerning who thus Diodorus Siculus, they say, the Nile breaking through his dams and overflowing his banks drowned all Egypt, especially that part where Prometheus ruled, where all inhabitants were swallowed by the deluge. So that is fabled of Prometheus is not but a part of the universal deluge, which the name Prometheus proves, because it signifies sprung from heaven, and is the same with Noah, whom they hold to be the first father of all mankind, or regenerated from his wife Asia." That one, Viracocha, came out of the Great Lake Titicaca and settled his residence upon Tiwanaku, where yet remains the ruins of ancient walls built after a wonderful manner. At length, removing from Tiwanaku to Cusco, he began to multiply the generation of mankind. The title of this book is America, being the latest and most accurate description of the New World, and there's a subtitle, it's very long. It's written by a catalog of authors and was published in London, 1671. This citation does reflect a type of thinking prior to the Ice Age theory, which emerged 160 years later. Now, by the mid-1800s, the Ice Age theory appears, and Harry, you discuss this in the video that you produced, titled Religion of Geology. Some believe there is evidence of only one ice age, but you're saying that there was likely no ice age. Would you please tell listeners what started you on this path of research? You are a catastrophist in regard to what carved the Earth's topography. Please tell listeners what you used as source material in this video, Religion of Geology.
Well, let's first establish a fundamental foundation, in so much as that this video in my research says that there are no ice ages. The information just does not say. It is the Ice Age theory. Now, 30, 40 years ago, it was called the theory. Now, it is just accepted as fact. And people will associate this pseudo-fact with reality, in so much as that this is what they've been taught. This is what we learned in school. This is what all the books say. If you go online, oh, there were ice ages. Back in the 60s, it was like 4, and then they've added a couple. But you could say, oh, well, through millions of years, there could have been thousands, and nobody would be able to argue one way or the other. So studying the information available in World Book Encyclopedia, my dad had 2 encyclopedia sets on the shelf when I was born, or just after, World Book and Funk and Wagnalls, the big brown with the gold binder. And I had just looked at it in Ice Ages because there was this TV show about it. And later in life, I realized that's all people know about the Ice Age is what they saw on a TV show, or what they bothered to see online with YouTube or whatever. It all just makes it up as you go. Okay, well, this happened, then this happened. Then the ice, they don't give a reason how come the ice would form in the first place or how it would move. Just looking at the World Book Encyclopedia when I was a kid and seeing here's the first one, here's the second one, here's the third one, here's the fourth one. Well, why didn't the fourth one cover up 3, 2, and 1? And with so many items that I became more aware with later in life is all you have to do is look at it and put 2 and 2 together and a little bit of common sense, and it doesn't make sense. And they had the pictures right there. And I show those same pictures because later in life, just a couple of years ago, one of my friends gave me a World Book Encyclopedia from the 60s, exactly what I grew up with. And so I went right back to it, and that's what I used in that video. So what I'm saying is if you remove the Ice Age theory from geology altogether, there is nothing they have to predicate anything on. They have nothing. Nothing. They predicate everything on the Ice Age theory, which is a made-up theory, which I prove in the video. And that's what I noticed when I was looking at these old World Book Encyclopedias, is there were 1, 2, 3, 4. And how come the fourth one or the third one didn't cover up every evidence of the first and second one, or the third from the fourth? It just, none of it made any common sense. It just never made any sense. I was always trying to read between the lines, and that was like maybe 8, 9 years old. I just put it in the back of my mind, nothing. And then later, when I got, World Book Encyclopedia again, and I started looking at it, I said, this is the one I want to use in my presentation. And Jeff, as you referenced, concerning Lake Titicaca and Tiwanaku, I said, this is a lake that is at 12,500 feet above sea level. And I can't remember exactly how deep it is. What, 900 feet or 600 feet? It's deep. It's deep. And everything to me seems to prevail in my small mind that this entire complex was down closer to sea level and just rose up straight 12,000 feet straight up into the air in just a matter of seconds. I deduced that by seeing the geography of how the river flows out of Lake Titicaca and down towards the ocean. If you follow that river, that stream, as little or much as it is, it's quite fascinating, and others may come to that conclusion too, because I'm thinking outside the box. I don't think geology. Once you get this fake Ice Age theory out of your mind and you're looking at geography, you can see it with a whole new lens.
Harry, according to geologists, the Earth began cooling after the age of dinosaurs 60 million years ago, but early stages of the ice ages began 1 million years ago. There are several ice ages mentioned that occur in Europe and North America. The latest ice age is about 10,000 years ago, and that's the Wisconsin Ice Age. Now, when the ice sheets are depicted in the diagram you show, they move over the Hudson Bay, which is said to be 300 feet lower. You point out, quote, all geology books declare the ocean level dropped at least 300 feet. Okay, please tell listeners here, because I think this is important to understand. Tell listeners about the origin of this 300 feet discrepancy in understanding sea levels and the Ice Age.
Well, if we're going to say that the oceans dropped 300 feet, that would explain where the water came from that made the ice sheets. Well, the problem is the ocean is salt water. And salt water will freeze, but it doesn't freeze hard as a rock. Salt water freezes quite brittly, like a slush, a real hard slush, just regular ocean water. Now, as you get towards the poles, the water does become more fresh. However, it doesn't explain how that much water evaporated the oceans all over the world in just a limited amount of time, and how it did it again and again and again and again. And just, okay, so how did all of the aquatic animals become extinct? Why didn't all the other animals become extinct? What are the birds? If there's nothing but ice ages, what are the birds? All the birds are going to, and animals are going to flee to the tropics. I mean, there's a lot of snakes, Gila monsters, raccoon. Everybody's going to just flee to the south before the ice age comes. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. So when you step back and look at the whole thing, it just doesn't make any sense, and it's just conjured up, and they vote on it. And I hope we're going to get into that later, is they vote on it. The whole synopsis is based on the fact that as the Earth's water evaporated, it evaporated 300 feet of water into the atmosphere, I guess along the equator, that everything drained along the equator, because as that same water was evaporating, it was freezing in the northern pole regions and the southern pole regions, because you have to see that whatever happened in the north with the ice glaciers, it's real hard to find information concerning the South American or the Antarctic ice sheets came across in the Ice Age. How does ice go down 300 feet and then glide across water, salt water or fresh water, either one, and just push across the water and come up on the other side? Well, you got me. It's just all make it up as you go. The Hudson Bay is, if you look at the ice ages, Hudson Bay really throws a wrench in the works. I tell you, and so do the Great Lakes too. And what they'll say is the Great Lakes were formed by the ice ages melting. Well, how? How? If they're at 500 feet above sea level and they're 900, 1,400 feet deep, how does the ice glacier carve that while it's melting? Explain that to me. How do you think that happened? And then as soon as anybody starts, well, I've got 14 arguments, different. So you just have to make it up as you go.
There's a lot to learn about ice sheets. These are sheets of ice miles and miles thick, known to advance and recede over tracts of land. The questions that come up in the text and your inquiry as well, Harry, is how the ice sheets skipped over certain geographic areas. For example, central southern Wisconsin showed no signs of glacial remnants. Please talk about this anomaly.
Well, I don't think that there were ice sheets there. You can clearly see on the diagrams that central Wisconsin, there's a spot in central Wisconsin about where the dells are that did not see the ice age or ice sheet, but it did all around and very well southern. Now, what gets me about Yosemite is they say, oh, look at this, Yosemite National Park, it is just carved out by an ice glacier. So that ice with a hardness of 1.5 or 7 carved through granite a U-shaped valley. But there's no evidence of ice sheets north of that in any direction for 300 miles. So the ice sheet must have had a map and said, okay, I'm going to Yosemite and just jump over several hundred miles of land and just replant my ice and just make it go southward and cut through a valley. And then there's discrepancies because they always say, for instance, that the ice glaciers cut U-shaped valleys, and they also say that they cut V-shaped valleys. So I'm just asking them to make up their minds.
We're forced to imagine something in our minds against the laws of physics, but we're forced to imagine that this is the case if we were to accept it.
And to question what the scholars say makes you a heretic or a conspiracy theorist or this or that or this or that. Even though what you're saying has a lot of common sense in back of it, you're just labeled as a heretic. Somebody that, and I'm sure you've heard this before, is you're not accepting the science. It's science. And whenever you hear somebody say it's science, just reply to them, it's science fiction. It's science fiction.
Well, Harry, it's explained that as glaciers slowly spread out, they push soil and loose rocks ahead of them like giant bulldozers. They left scratches or striae on rocks over which they moved. Soil and rocks left behind when the ice melted formed variously shaped mounds called moraines. Here you point out the main issue with this theory, and that's ice sheets pushing boulders weighing hundreds of tons miles high into mountains. What's troubling here is this process of glaciation is accepted to be responsible for the placement of giant rocks, or as they're known to be called, erratics. But as the logic of the Ice Age theory falls apart, where are the alternative explanations, the substitute theories? Nearly 300 years ago, those opposing the Ice Age theory knew there's a problem with the movement of ice. One of those critics back then was Sir Henry Haworth. The idea of sliding or moving of the base of the ice sheet over the countryside due to an unknown factor in the ice sheets has been conceived. Haworth asks how erratics are deposited perched higher than their source derived, and would itself be crushed and reduced to slush by its own pressure long before the rock upon which it stands could itself be broken. We must always remember the kinds of materials upon which the supposed crushing was effected. Harry, what are your thoughts on Haworth's opinion here?
All right, like you had just mentioned, as the glaciers slowly spread out, they pushed soil and loose rocks ahead. Okay, and I think that's something that a lot of people aren't going to realize is, according to the diagrams and all of their research, the glaciers spread north, south, east, and west for just hundreds and hundreds of miles. Whereas a geologist might say off the cuff that, oh, well, the glaciers, they spread southward. Well, not necessarily. They spread in all directions. And I think that's one thing that they don't address properly is, okay, well, how did that happen? Such and such. Oh, well, just make it up as you go. So when somebody is looking at how thick the ice sheets are, they're 2 miles thick. So if we look at this logically, it takes 10 inches of snow to make 1 inch of ice/water. My question is, how high were the clouds? How cold was it? How did the cold sustain? And then, I just always had issues. And how does that ice cut through rock, push boulders? How does all of that happen? And get back to Sir Henry Howarth, he had some of the same questions that I did. Is it, how does that amount of ice just push heavy rocks and soil until uphill? It pushed the stuff uphill.
Harry, you reference William Corliss, author of Unknown Earth, a handbook of geological enigmas. Please tell listeners about William Corliss.
Well, he's been a hero of mine for probably 35, close to 40 years. He had the source book project. He was a physicist. He's a brilliant man, and several books. Just a great thinker. I actually knew him. I had correspondence with him, actually, that I actually show in the video. And you can Google him online. He does have some Wikipedia stuff, that he worked for the American military, that he was a physicist, an astrophysicist, and he was a compiler in the same vein as Charles Fort, but he used old scientific magazines instead of newspapers, basically. And he was on to the same questions that I had. Even as I became more familiar with William Corliss and his work in those books, and I said, okay, these guys are just proving what I've always speculated. This is what I've been talking about. And here I have other people backing me up as I'm backing them up with the same type of rhetoric.
It sounds like a very interesting person. I have one of his books as well. It appears that it's so important, Harry, to get the public entrained to thinking a certain way about how the Earth's surface was sculpted. And that can sometimes automatically block other kind of natural exploration or investigations. As you mentioned, blame it on the glaciers. Case closed. No more consideration required. We're to assume that great minds have reached a correct evaluation through the centuries about the true nature of drift formation, and the remnants of proposed ice sheets are the evidence. Let's go now to hear part of the presentation, Religion of Geology by Harry Hubbard, and this section is on the William Corliss book.
Now, we're going to look at another one of my favorite all-time books, written by one of my favorite all-time people, William R. Corliss. Unknown Earth, a handbook of geological enigmas. And this book is 800 pages of just knowledge and fun and adventure, and I have read it several times. I love this book. It is one of my mainstays. Now, if there's a geologist out there that wants to challenge me on anything, if you haven't read this book or you're unfamiliar with it, you are scholastically, academically naked. You don't know what you don't know what you're talking about, because they're not going to show you what I'm fixing to show you in college. You're never going to see in college what I'm fixing to show you. Okay, so don't even go there. If you want to oppose me and you don't have this book, you really don't have a leg to stand on. And I had a rapport with Mr. Corliss, and this book came out in 1980. What Mr. Corliss does is he compiles a lot of journals and such, scientific journals, geological journals, all kinds of things like that. He puts them in an order where you can understand them, and in different subject lines and headers. Very difficult what this man has done. And I got this letter from him when I was living down on the border working in Mexico. And you'll see here, Mr. Hubbard, thanks for the additional book orders. This time I remember to sign them. As for signatures on the first two, perhaps the enclosures will help me. Thanks also for your 2 reports. Sometime I hope you will tell me just what your business is and how these reports are published. Just curious. I think I sent him some book reviews, some book reports that I'd done. And now, this particular book, again, came out in 1980. And very interesting man. Now, if you ever called the number to a source book project, Mr. Corliss would never talk on the phone. He would never speak to his customers or to any of his colleagues over the phone. And I asked the lady that worked there, I said, well, why wouldn't he? She goes, he'll write you a letter. You know, no problem there. He'll type you up a letter, but he doesn't talk on the phone. And I said, well, why not? And she makes total sense. She goes, because that's all he would ever be doing, is talking on the phone, answering questions from his biggest fans. And she's right. Okay, we're going to pick up on page 32, the drift and the ice ages. Any theory of drift formation must account for these singular accumulations, as well as an immense family of scratches, lake basins, and various gougings. The continental ice sheets of the glacial epoch are commonly credited with this colossal sculpturing. Although the ice ages have assumed the status of scientific dogma, some facts of the drift are not in accordance with the theory, and the problems are drift deposits and apparent glacial striations south of the charted ice sheets, erratic blocks hundreds of feet above their quarrying points that call into question the motive force pushing the ice sheets and their mechanical strength. Had a big engine, it's a bulldozer. Okay, these ice sheets were pushing rocks like our modern day bulldozers can't even attempt. Striations indicating northward motion, which I've already showed you. Boulder trains and associated erosion that seem to demand cataclysmic flooding. Geological convulsions, indeed, may have sculptured northern terrains, but the anomalies presented below have not significantly reduced the number of Ice Age believers. And I don't think that this video here will be, as far as a geologist goes, he's not going to throw in the towel and say, okay, I don't believe in ice ages or ice glaciers theory. This Harry Hubbard, he just doesn't know what he's talking about. They make their living teaching what I am opposing here, okay? So it's not going to change their attitude, and they're not going to think past their nose. But I'm going to be showing you a lot of information here that don't make a whole lot of sense if you think. The drift phenomena around the world have been interpreted by many geologists in terms of the glacial theory. A great many problems of a fundamental nature are involved with this interpretation. The cause of the ice ages has never been determined. That's interesting, isn't it? All of these facts suggest that the reality of the ice ages has not been proved. All right, but are they going to stop teaching it? No. There are many things that have not been proved, but does that stop anyone from teaching it? No, they teach it as fact, and they always will, they always have, and that's how they make their money. If there was a geologist trying to get on at some college, or even a Christian university, complaining that there ain't no ice ages, like me, for instance, that there was no ice age, there's no proof of glaciation, you think they'd get hired? No, I doubt it. The mantle of unconsolidated material similar to that of Europe and North America also occurs in parts of India, in South Africa, the tropical zones of South America, and in many mountainous areas of the world, usually referred to as drift. The word drift means anything you want it to. The material is also known as boulder clay, diluvium, outwash, deposits, glacial, moraine, and till, and loess. You could also say loess, and that's just what they do. They make it up as they go, and they give it all these fancy names. Make it up as you go. Let's go next page. This is page number 34. The rimmed plateau and prairie mounds are explained in the glacial theory as landforms created during the melting of the great ice sheets. The glaciers, it is believed, sometimes melted, get this, in such a way that isolated blocks of ice were formed that wasted away and deposited their debris in various kinds of rimmed structures and plateau. Drumlins and flutings, which drumlin is a small round hill. We'll look at it here. Explained as the effects of the movement of the drumlins are hills shaped like the inverted bowl of a spoon. Glacial flutings are similar, elongated parallel ridges and troughs. And these may stretch for several miles in the prairies of Canada and parts of North Dakota and Montana. Drumlins and flutings are often composed of drift, but many are bedrock and partly bedrock. So they don't know. Look at this. Geologists believe that the last of the ice disappeared only a few thousand years ago. Striations are frequently present on the surface of the bedrock, underlying and attributed to the ice sheets in the glacial theory. As the ice sheet moved, it is supposed there were large numbers of stones carried along in its base that gouged the bedrock as the ice sheet went along. We're talking a Caterpillar bulldozer, 100 times the size of what we have today. My goodness, and so much more powerful. Large boulders found in some regions with a composition quite different from that of the bedrock in the vicinity. And here we go. Large boulders of quite different composition are known as erratics. And I know you geologists that you've been waiting. What about erratics? You've been waiting for me to mention erratics. What about erratics? What about it? How do you explain that? How do you explain that? You've been waiting for it. And are considered to have been transported from regions afar by the moving ice sheets. These may sometimes be as large as houses. Some of them are several acres large. We're talking huge. Some of them are the size of several houses put together, and are usually rounded, though some are of irregular shape. So it doesn't matter. It can be on top of the ground. It can be round. It can be square. It can be rectangular. It can look like a crag. It can look like a small miniature mountain. Do they care? No. It is an erratic boulder. The rise of the glacial theory. A leading exponent of the diluvial theory of the drift was William Buckland of Oxford. He was among the first, however, to abandon this idea in favor of the glacial theory of Louis Agassiz, who we're going to get into a little bit more here. And here's our buddy Charles Lyell, however, still favored the iceberg theory for most of the drift. So they have these. We're going to see some contradictions here. The glacial theory accepted, but with some opposition. Agassiz came to America in 1846 and energetically proclaimed the glacial theory while teaching at, get this, Harvard University. Gradually, the theory of a great glacial age gained acceptance. And then is when they started putting it all together, putting not one, not two, not three, not four, and then just going back and making as many glacial ice ages as they could, as they wanted to. That explains it. If this ice age doesn't explain it, let's invent and create another one, and that will do it. Although strong opposition was voiced by geologists such as Dawson and Howarth, which we're going to look at some more Howarth stuff. Howarth wrote numerous articles against it, saying it's a bunch of crap. His idea of a violent, catastrophic origin of the drift was ridiculed.
That was an excerpt from Harry Hubbard's presentation titled Religion of Geology.
Okay, you were asking about some of my resources, and as I had Reader's Digest, Natural Wonders of the World, and I show in there where there was this mountain in northern Siberia. And they say that it was carved with glaciation, that the glaciers were covering it, and the temperature today never exceeds minus 56. Well, my question is, where did the glacier go? How did it disappear? And another one is, when we're putting these ice glaciers in New Caledonia, out in the middle of the Pacific, the southern Pacific Ocean, how does that ice travel across the ocean for hundreds and hundreds of miles? It just make it up as you go. Just make it up as you go.
Did you look at alternative theories, Harry, in regard to those questions?
I analyzed a couple of different encyclopedia sets that say the same thing. They all parrot the same thing. And if you ask someone today, why do they believe in glaciers? It's going to be say, well, I've heard it all my life. The same as evolution, so many other paradigms and theories that just make no sense whatsoever. When you get back beyond the television screen and you start really asking serious questions about how things happen and the logic or illogic concerning that.
Another interesting area of critique is questioning how an ice age would occur in the tropics. Ice age in the tropics. In 1865, Augustus, one of the Ice Age theorists, went to equatorial Brazil, one of the hottest places in the world, where he found all the signs he ascribed to the action of ice. Even those who had previously agreed with him became distressed. You have several things going on. One is, if the theory is correct, then glaciers were over the equator in this area. Second, scrap the theory because it's not possible to have the ice in this region. And third, this bedrock was scarred from when it was a colder climate, ascribing to the continental drift theory. Harry, please talk more about the ice age in the tropics and how the continental drift theory came about.
Well, my thoughts are that there never was an ice age in the tropics, even though I show case after case, according to the experts, where the ice age entered the tropics by some miraculous miracle, even New Caledonia, and I also put the ice glaciers in the Sahara Desert. So that is the pinnacle of the video, is putting the ice ages in the Sahara Desert. And with continental drift theory, just make it up. Oh, well, this ice age did this at this continental drift and this and that. And I've got a poster on my wall. I wish I could show it to you. I'm going to use it eventually in a video. And it's like 3 plates right in North America. Well, where do these plates go with these vast oceans? I'm just asking. So that's my take on the continental drift theory and the ice age in the tropics. It just didn't happen that way. And I also want to say,
within the mudflood and meltology communities of research, some consider that water didn't carve out the Grand Canyon. Instead, it appears fractal in nature, or what's called the Lichtenberg burning. This process uses high voltage electricity, often 2,000 to 10,000 volts, to create tree-like or lightning-like patterns that are permanently charred into the wood surface. A conductive solution is needed, usually baking soda and water. I would not try this at home. It's very dangerous, and just reading on it, it seems that a lot of people are electrocuting themselves in this process. However, you do have a very similar pattern that looks like a canyon. The fractal nature of it is very similar to canyons from above. But Harry, please talk about your thoughts on alternative ideas about the formation of canyons.
Well, I can give you an account of my own impression that I witnessed with my own eyes through binoculars. I was standing on the north end of a canyon in Alabama. This is like 25 years ago. And I just happened to have it focused on a rock ledge, and out of the sky comes a big bolt of lightning, just shatters a huge boulder, and the boulder falls down and takes 3 huge pine trees with it. And there's you got people online, the Thunderbolt Project or whatever, but that goes into, as far as canyons go, there's basically two kinds of canyons that geologists will accept. That's canyons on land and canyons in the ocean. Are we good with that? Okay, so whenever a canyon is in the ocean, deep in the ocean, a huge canyon, the geologists say, well, that happened when that was carved when it was on land. And then they'll take the same canyons, like Grand Canyon, the Big Canyon in Colorado. There's several canyons in Colorado. And then the Mile Deep Canyon in Mexico, down in central Mexico. I'll say, well, these were carved when it was all covered with water. So it's a conundrum. It's something that I don't understand. Okay, this is what the geologists say about this. And then if you read more about the geology, this was carved. And they just are very flippant about it, like it's the fact. This is the fact of this. This is the fact of that. And I believe that canyons are formed with just in a matter of moments, not just hundreds and hundreds and millions of years of the water going down, because the tops of the canyons are very, very wide. They're very, very wide. So was Colorado River, was it 1.5 miles wide when it first started down towards the ocean? I just don't believe so.
I often think about that too when I see creeks winding through certain valleys, and how the initial trench of a creek is like 0.5 mile wide, and then it narrows through these steps down into 100 yards wide. All right, let's hear more from Harry Hubbard's video titled Religion of Geology. Here we get some detail into the life of Louis Agassiz. And the source of this material is from Emanuel Velikovsky's book titled Earth in Upheaval. Let's have a listen.
Another one of my all-time favorite books by Emanuel Velikovsky. He's got several books I really like. It's called Earth in Upheaval. And now we're going to see where such a stupid idea as ice glaciers and ice ages comes from. We're going to now start to see where it comes from. Let's see the birth of it. This comes from page 34, chapter 4, Ice, the birth of the Ice Age theory. In 1836, Louis Agassiz, who we already met, from Switzerland, went with Professor Carpentier, another naturalist, to an alpine glacier to demonstrate to him the fallacy of the new idea that an ice sheet once covered a large part of Europe. 4 years before, a teacher in a small town forestry school, Bernardelli had written, once the polar ice reached as far as the southern limit of the district, which is still marked by the erratics. And as far as Velikovsky knew, who was from Russia, brilliant guy, this was the first mention of any of it. At the edge of the glacier, Agassiz, who came as a skeptic, was himself converted. He became the chief apostle of the new theory, or the new religion. Basically, he's writing, and you have to see Velikovsky's humor is just very, very deep, very, very deep. He built a hut on the glacier of Ar and lived in it, so that he could observe the movements of the ice. And everybody was really impressed with that, really impressed. So now we're seeing where it came from. Agassiz made his conclusions with respect to other parts of the world on the basis of observations limited to Switzerland and its surroundings. That's right. He thought that if he could convert two of the leading geologists, Buckland, the author of this book, and Murchison, to the Ice Age theory, and thus win their support, the task of gaining recognition for it would become much easier. Haven't we seen that in more recent times too? Among the older naturalists, one stood by me, Dr. Buckland, Dean of Westminster. We first went to the Highlands of Scotland, and it is one of the delightful recollections of my life.
that as we approached the castle of the Duke of Argyll, standing in a valley not unlike some in the Swiss valleys, I said to Buckland, "Here we shall find our first traces of the glaciers." And as the stage entered the valley, we actually drove over an ancient terminal moraine which spanned the opening of the valley. It was a setting for revelation, Agassiz want a follower. How poetic, how prophetic, how convenient. A few weeks later, November of 1840, Agassiz read a paper before the Geological Society of London, surmising the excursion in the light of the Ice Age theory. And Buckland, who was then president of the society, followed with a paper of his own on the same subject. Even before the meeting, he had written to Agassiz of the success of his missionary work. Look at that, his religious work. Lyell has adopted your theory too. Now, who's that? That's Charles Lyell. Lyell has adopted your theory in toto. On my showing him a beautiful cluster of moraines within 2 miles of his father's house, he instantly accepted it as solving a host of difficulties that have all his life embarrassed him. Lyell, too, agreed to read a paper less than 3 weeks after this episode. Man, oh man, 2 miles away from his house, his childhood home. At the November meeting of the society, Murchison attempted an opposition, but, in the words of Agassiz, did not produce much effect. He added, Dr. Buckland was truly eloquent. That same year, 1840, Agassiz published his theory in a work titled Etudes des glaciers. And here, if you want to read that. Now, we're going to go to page 37. Thus, Agassiz maintained that the Western Alps had risen very recently at the end of the last ice age and were younger than the carcasses of mammoths in Siberia, the flesh of which is still edible. These animals, he thought, had been killed at the beginning of the ice age. It is often said that Agassiz added from 500,000 to 1,000,000 years to the recent history of the world by inserting the Great Ice Age between the Tertiary, or the Age of Mammals, and the recent, comprising Late Stone Age. Remember, this is mid-1800s. That the 1,000,000-year span for the Ice Age is Lyell's estimate, and he interpreted Agassiz's theory in the spirit of uniformity. When it comes to the theory of uniformity, Velikovsky is just all over the place. He really destroys that. The theory of a continental ice cover was acceptable to Lyell. He agreed to it, satisfied to go no farther than, for his proof, than 2 miles from his home. That proves it. He realized that floating icebergs could not explain the phenomena of drift and erratic boulders in all places. The only alternative had been the waves of translation or tidal waves traveling on land. But this was outright catastrophic. Now, with the continental ice theory, he felt he had the correct solution if the catastrophic aspect of the theory was as originally suggested by Agassiz. A follower of Cuvier was eliminated. It was not yet asked what produced such a cover. Let's not ask the question of where the ice came from. Let's not ask what produced the ice. We're not going to go there. Next, page 38. On the Russian plains, soon after the historic meeting, at which the Ice Age theory was accepted by the majority of the members of the Geological Society, Murchison went to Russia, where he had been invited by Tsar Nicholas I to make geological survey of the empire. So that's going to be, what, 1850? or so, or late 1840s. Okay, now we're back to the late 1840s with Murchison, and this is just after he completed his survey for Tsar Nicholas I. Murchison rejected the application of the terrestrial glacier theory to Sweden, Finland, northeastern Russia, and the whole of northern Germany. In short, to all the Low Countries of Europe.
That was another excerpt from the video titled Religion of Geology. Our guest is Harry Hubbard, and we're talking about the critique of the Ice Age theory. Well, this video was produced about 9 years ago, about 2015. At that time, there was a fever pitch concern about climate change. Many don't realize this, but Bill Gates quietly softened his position on climate change, stating, quote, "It will not lead to humanity's demise." And I wondered what that was about. Many also don't realize that Bill Gates is financing geoengineering research, solar radiation management, and I suspect the actual real-time operations. So if he's saying climate change isn't as serious, I wonder if the data points from the solar radiation management operations are of any influence to the new opinion. The religion of geology and climate change and warming of the planet played upon the collective emotional body, the paradigm, as many were convinced resources are in decline and there's a scarcity, species and ecosystems are dying out. Harry, what are your thoughts on this paradigm?
Well, that's exactly what it is. It's a paradigm. And the way that you stated is on the changing and warming. You'll remember in the 90s, it was global warming. In the late 90s, early 2000s, it became climate change. But it's still the same thing. The experts like on PBS and NPR and other news outlets, they'll be saying, due to the fact that the earth is warming due to climate change, or the lakes are receding due to climate change, the oceans are receding due to climate change. They're using climate change for the exact same reason as they used to use global warming, which I don't see any part of it. You know, it's warm, it's cold. Ecosystems dying out, I don't know. If an ecosystem's dying out, I would say it was more to plant and herbicides and pesticides and pollution, more so than the ecology or the religion of geology concerning climate change and global warming. I would like to relate a story in my childhood concerning the ice ages and such. As I remember back in the early 70s, my mom and dad talking over the phone. And I remember my mom saying to my dad, this is the old long extension cord, whatever. She said, well, I guess I need to take the boys to Sears to get overcoats, new overcoats. And it had just come out over the TV and everything that we were headed for an ice age. And my mother and father thought that it was appropriate to get myself and my big brother new overcoats. I'm just saying, that's how effectual it was. And we went to Sears, and it was in the middle of the summertime, and they didn't have any winter coats. Well, I can tell you this, the reason Sears didn't have any overcoats is because they were sold out.
That's a great anecdote, Harry. Boys' winter coats sold out at Sears in the summer, probably because of the Ice Age warnings broadcast. It's a similar emotional state causing people to mass protest against what they think is causing climate change, greenhouse gases accelerated by burning of fossil fuel as one source. And I suspect the logical way to remedy the situation is to instead focus these brilliant minds, who I feel have been propagandized, into bringing actual practical zero-point energy into existence. And I'm sure we'll get there, but something has to change within us all on a collective level, maybe deflecting a lot of this propaganda with more critical thinking, that type of thing. Harry, the Ice Age theory is among a long list of topics that you're interested in researching more deeply or have researched. Here are some of the subjects on the list. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Van Allen Radiation Belts, the Book of Enoch, Tartaria, Dead Sea Scrolls, Flat Earth, and Continental Drift.
Okay, Jeff, I cover the Van Allen belts in my video called The Carrington Event. And the Book of Enoch and Josephus are covered in addendum number 3. And I cover other videos. Flamenco, for instance, is covered in Secret Ancient Man, along with some of the other things too. There's a lot of entertainment if you're thinking outside the box. If you want some brain candy of just out of the box thinking and showing you what other people believe or think or could possibly project, then my channel is really suited for you if you have a long attention span. Long attention spans are handy, but I try to keep the interest up and add comedy to some of my really longer ones and more. The more serious that a topic is, the more comedy I like to have in it.
What is the YouTube channel, Harry?
It's called At Alexander's Lost Tomb, or you can type in Harry Hubbard, or you can type in Illinois Caves. It comes under, the name has changed, but the name in the search engines still remains the same, no matter what.
I see.
And I don't have a website anymore because it got zapped, but it is on Wayback Machine.
Okay.
And it's quite extensive. Everything is online with the YouTube channel, even my books, whatever, and other things too. So it's quite entertaining for people that are into this type of nonsensical nonsense.
Harry, it seems that geologists have developed too strong a bias toward ancient ice ages to seriously consider other mechanisms for the observed rocks. This is important, especially when the societal changes are built on the foundation of this kind of data. Changes such as culling livestock, creating lab-grown meat with no long-term testing, spending billions of tax dollars on green energy, which have shown to be unsuccessful, and to also be networks for grift, and the list goes on. I really appreciate this video you put together, Religion of Geology. It's on your YouTube channel, Harry Hubbard. Harry, thank you again for being on In Other News.
Thank you, Jeff. It's been a pleasure. And anytime you want to discuss any of my videos, I know we've done shows in the past concerning my videos, and they really are over the edge, oblivion. And I appreciate your format that can sustain that. Like you've said before, paradigm crusher. It's the paradigm that we have to deal with.
That's going to do it for In Other News. I'm Jeff Brady. Visit inothernewsradio.com for archives and more information about the guests.